Minerva presents, welcome book-loving comrades, to a sanctuary where the love for reading knows no bounds. Today, we delve into the depths of The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Liking and following my YouTube channel is the best way to show your support and ensure you never miss any of my future uploads. So, if you're enjoying what you're watching, smash that like button, hit that subscribe follow button, and don't forget to leave a comment to share your thought. Bankruptcy 1. The Catcher in the Rye by way of J.D. Salinger is advised within the first person by the primary person, Holden Caulfield. Holden starts through saying that he will now not be telling a tale approximately his early life and divulging private statistics about his parents. He says his parents are satisfactory, but touchy, and would now not like him speaking approximately them. Instead, he will only talk about the events that came about final Christmas. The ones events led to him being dispatched to the unnamed region he is now. He says this is run down and is relaxing. Moreover, he claims he hasn't even informed his brother DB every component that has happened to him. BB is an author in Hollywood. He as soon as wrote an ebook of quick tales that Holden thinks is excellent. Now DB is making a number of money writing for the movies. That's a profession Holden compares to prostitution. Holden says he handiest wants start this story at the day he left Pincy Prep. Holden has little respect for the Pennsylvania boarding college for boys. He named callings on the advertising the school uses, which functions a young guy on a horse. Holden says has in no way visible a horse everywhere on school grounds. He starts off evolved his story at a Saturday football recreation with Saxon Hall. It is the game of the hour, and the stands are packed at the Pincy side. Holden watches the game from a distance. He dislikes everything about Pincy. He especially doesn't like the guideline that permits simplest seniors to bring girls to the soccer video games. The headmaster's daughter, Selma Thurmer, is within the stands. Holden does not suppose she could be very quiet, however, she is first class. He recalls a communication they as soon as had on a bus. He turned into impressed that she didn't brag about her father's position at the college. Holden now stands on a hill nonetheless, looking the game from a distance. He has simply back from New York with the fencing group. He's the manager of the group. That morning, the team had long gone to the town for a meet. However, it needed to be canceled due to the fact Holden left all the team's device at the subway. The gamers did not talk to him all of the way domestic at the train. However, Holden thinks the entirety become humorous. He says he also chose now not to visit the game due to the fact he needs to say goodbye to his history trainer, Mr. Spencer. Christmas break is arising and Holden knows he'll now not be returning to school. He has been kicked out for failing. Holden runs to the main gate and feels pretty winded. He claims he was a heavy smoker before he turned into forced to quit. He reverts to the present and says he's in an area which he still does no longer call for checkups because he nearly got D. He says he is now healthy. He resumes his tale, selecting up on the day he went to look Mr. Spencer. Mrs. Spencer warmly welcomes in and shall we him in. She tells him that Mr. Spencer is in his room. Bankruptcy 2-2. Holden is going into Mr. Spencer's room. He thinks the room is depressing. Mr. Spencer's tablets and his vintage bathrobe specially repel him. Holden tells Mr. Spencer he has come to mention good. Bye. The vintage guy asks Holden to take a seat down. Mr. Spencer then asks what the headmaster, Dr. Thurman, said to Holden. Holden recounts how Dr. Thurman advised him that lifestyles became a game and that it ought to be performed by means of the policies. Mr. Spencer has the same opinion with Dr. Thurman, but Holden is not satisfied with the aid of the logic. Holden tells Mr. Spencer that his mother and father do not know that he has been expelled. He says they will be very angry because that is the fourth school he has attended. Holden thinks about how he regularly behaves as if he's 13. Mr. Spencer says Holden's mother and father are very great. Holden concurs. Mr. Spencer begins to impeach Holden about his direction load. Holden admits that he's failing 4 out of 5 classes. Mr. Spencer says he needed to flunk Holden due to the fact he knew nothing approximately the subject. Mr. Spencer asks Holden to pick out his exam paper. This demand makes Holden very sorry that he stopped to say good bye to his trainer. Mr. Spencer begins analyzing Holden's essay query on Egyptians. It's far clear Holden did not recognize something approximately the subject, and he turns into very uncomfortable listening to his teacher read his answers. On the quit of the essay, Mr. Spencer reads a "Be aware" Holden wrote saying that he failed to understand anything approximately Egyptians, and that Mr. Spencer should no longer feel awful about flunking him. Holden thinks that he's going to never deliver Mr. Spencer for embarrassing him by using studying the word aloud. As the two talk Mr. Spencer's reasons for flunking Holden, the boy's mind starts to wander. He wonders wherein the ducks in Relevant Park go within the winter. Mr. Spencer is very chronic with Holden and continues to ask him about his issues with school. He wants to know why Holden ended his ultimate college, Elkton Hills. Holden simply says that it's miles an extended tale, but the query makes him think about his time on the college. He hated the headmaster due to the fact he changed into phony. At school activities, the headmaster might ignore students' dad and mom who were not stylish or attractive. Holden tells Mr. Spencer that he does want to have a bright destiny and that he's just going through an unproductive segment. As Holden leaves, Mr. Spencer yells something to him that sounds like correct luck. Holden hopes that isn't always what he said due to the fact he hates the time period and thinks that he could by no means say it to someone. Bankruptcy 3. Holden begins the chapter through announcing he's the maximum first-rate liar you ever saw in your lifestyles. It is awful. He says he lies approximately even easy matters and that he lied to Mr. Spencer when he informed him that he had to pass the gym. Instead, Holden is on his way to his room within the Ossenberger Memorial Wing of the brand new dormitories. Mr. Ossenberger is an alumnus who donated a variety of cash to Pincy after becoming rich inside the assignment enterprise. Holden recollects a speech Ossenberger gave to the scholars. Holden thinks Ossenberger is a phony, and his speech become manner too long. Ossenberger advised the students to get on their knees and pray while they're in hassle. That is something that Holden taunts at. Holden thinks that the simplest top A part of the speech changed into while one in all his fellow students farted loudly within the middle of the chapel. Holden is relieved to go back to his room. Everyone continues to be at the game, so he is alone. He places on a purple hunting hat that he bought that morning in Nye, proper after he found out he had lost the crew's foils. He sits down and begins to study out of Africa, which he thinks is a quite properly book. At the same time as he's reading, a pupil named Ackley bursts into the room uninvited. Ackley's room is hooked up to his through a shower. Holden says that Ackley barges in on him constantly. He describes Ackley as bizarre, with a horrific case of acne and gross enamel. Holden continues analyzing, trying to ignore Ackley's presence, but Ackley questions Holden approximately the fencing meet. Holden ultimately explains how he lost the group's foils. While Ackley maintains to pester Holden, he offers up reading his ebook and starts to fake. He is blind. He primarily puts on the act due to the fact he is aware of it will annoy Ackley. But Ackley nonetheless doesn't depart the room. In reality, he stays and starts evolved cleansing and cutting his nails, which surely angers Holden. Ackley says that he cannot stand Holden's roommate, Ward Stradlater, but Holden defends Stradlater. Ackley does no longer like Stradlater due to the fact he once advised him to comb his tooth. Holden explains that Stradlater changed into now, not seeking to be suggest, he simply concept Ackley would sense higher if he had a easy mouth. Stradlater comes into the room and is very pleasant in a manner that Holden thinks is phony. He asks to borrow Holden's coat. Ackley is brusque to Stradlater and leaves the room. Stradlater takes to the air his shirt and prepares to shove before taking place his date. Holden is aware of that Stradlater walks around without a shirt on because he thinks he has a great build. Although indignant, Holden begrudgingly admits to himself that Stradlater is nicely constructed. Chapter 4. Holden would not have something to do, so he follows Stradlater into the bathroom as he shaves in preparation for his date. Holden notes that Stradlater seems neat, however he is honestly a slob. Absolutely everyone can inform that Ackley is grimy, however Stradlater is a mystery slob. Holden thinks that Stradlater seems virtually true while he is completed getting geared up due to the fact he's in love with himself, but his razor is continually dirty and rusty. Holden decides that Stradlater is ideal, searching in the form of way that would make him stand out in yearbook photos. In character, other guys at Pincy can also appearance better than Stradlater, however they may be not as photogenic. Whilst Holden is thinking about Stradlater's look, Stradlater asks Holden to do him a want. He needs Holden to write an English paper for him. Holden thinks that the request is ironic due to the fact that he is flunking out of school. Stradlater persists with his request, asking Holden to be a pal. Stradlater tells Holden that the paper may be on any challenge, as long as it is very descriptive. He also tells Holden not to do an excellent job at the paper due to the fact the instructor might suspect that Holden wrote it. Holden does a touch faucet dance on the toilet ground for amusing. Stradlater admires Holden's new hat. However, Holden is aware of he's most effective, flattering him, so he'll agree to write the paper. Much to Holden's surprise, Stradlater says his date is a woman named Jean Gallagher. Holden is aware of the woman and has to accurate him due to the fact her call is Jane. He may be very greatly surprised that Jane is on Pincy's campus. Holden goes on and on approximately the small info in their friendship. However, Stradlater does no longer pay interest. He's busy using Holden's hair merchandise. Stradlater best perks up while Holden mentions that Jane's stepfather is a drunk who used to stroll around naked. Holden asks Stradlater no longer to inform Jane that he is being kicked out of faculty. Stradlater has the same opinion and then takes Holden's jacket and leaves, but not before reminding Holden to write his paper. Holden cannot forestall thinking about Jane. Ackley comes back into the room, and Holden is clearly satisfied to peer him due to the fact their communique takes his thoughts off of other topics. Chapter 5. It's far Saturday night time, which means the students may be eating steak. Holden thinks that the college serves steak on Saturdays because Dad and Mom visit on Sundays. When the parents ask their sons what they ate for dinner the nighttime before, the lads will say steak in order to galvanize the dad and mom. In fact, the steaks are difficult, dry, and unappetizing. After dinner, the lads move outside to discover that it has snowed. Holden thinks that the snow may be very pretty, and he has a great time fooling around with the opposite college students. He and a friend, Mal Brassard, determined to see a movie. Holden feels pity for Ackley, who by no means has whatever to do on Saturday nights, so he asks Mal if Ackley can go together with them. Mal reluctantly agrees. Whilst Holden invitations Ackley, he isn't appreciative. He acts like he is doing Holden a want through going with him. Whilst Holden waits for Ackley to get ready, he opens the window and makes a snowball. He is set to throw it, but the whole thing appears so white and quite that he does not need to reduce to rubble the scenery. The boys take a bus to see the film. However, they have got already visible the movie this is being shown. As a substitute, they consume hamburgers and take the bus back to high school. Once they return, Ackley sticks around Holden's room and retells the tale of having intercourse with a woman the previous summer. Holden thinks he is lying due to the fact the tale adjustments whenever he tells it. In the end, Holden tells Ackley that he has to leave so he can write Stradlater's essay. Holden comes to a decision. He will now not describe a room. He writes about his brother Ally's baseball mitt. Ally used to write poems in inexperienced ink on his glove, so he ought to read them whilst he became within the outfield. Ally died of leukemia in July 1946. Holden says that Ally became years more youthful than him, however, an awful lot extra sensible. Holden also thinks that Ally was the nicest member of the family. The night Ally died, Holden broke all the home windows in the garage, along with his fist. Inside the technique, he additionally broke his hand. His own family wanted to take him to a psychiatrist. Holden, nonetheless, has Ally's mitt in his suitcase, so he takes it out and copies the poems. While he finishes writing, he can listen Ackley loud night breathing in the next room. Bankruptcy. 6. Stradlater comes into the room after his date, complaining about the cold climate. He doesn't say anything about Jane. Instead, he asks Holden if he wrote the composition. Holden tells him it's miles on the bed. Stradlater reads the paper and becomes very indignant that it's far approximately a baseball glove. It says that it have to were about a house or room. He tells Holden that he does the whole lot incorrect, and this is the motive he is flunking out of college. Holden receives up and pulls the paper out of Stradlater's hand. He tears it up and throws it away. Holden then returns to bed and starts to smoke a cigarette, which is forbidden in the dorms. He, in the end, asks Stradlater about his date. Stradlater says they did not have time to go to the Big Apple, so they just sat in the back seat of a pal's car. Holden demands to understand if Stradlater made sexual advances toward Jane. However, the older boy refuses to answer the questions at once. Holden says what passed off subsequent remains a blur to him, but he recalls seeking to hit Stradlater within the face. The next element he is aware of, he is down at the ground, with Stradlater sitting on pinnacle of him. Stradlater tries to inform him to prevent combating, however Holden is enraged and calls Stradlater a moron. Stradlater punches him within the face, then blames Holden for his violence by saying Holden provoked him. He tells Holden to head wash his face, after which leaves the room and walks down the corridor to the restroom. Holden sits at the floor for a while and then gets as much as take a look at his face inside the mirror. He says, "You've got by no means visible such gore on your existence." He's both scared and fascinated by his reflection. Holden has best been in fights in his life and has misplaced both of them. He says that he is genuinely a pacifist. He is going into Ackley's room. Bankruptcy. 7. Holden is going into Ackley's room. The combat has awaked Ackley. Holden seems for the mild and then turns it on. The blood on Holden's face shocks Ackley. Holden asks if Ackley wants to play canasta. Ackley tells him to attend to the blood. However, Holden dismisses his injuries, announcing the blood will stop. Holden then asks Ackley if he can sleep in his room. Ackley's roommate is away for the weekend, so there is an empty mattress. Ackley refuses the request, announcing he cannot provide Holden permission to sleep in his roommate's mattress. Holden unexpectedly feels so lonely he wishes he had been useless. He lies down at the roommate's bed and thinks approximately Stradlater's date with Jane. He becomes indignant thinking in the event that they had intercourse. Ackley falls asleep. Holden hears Stradlater go back to their room and visit bed. Holden thinks that he didn't even go searching to look wherein he went. He is so lonely. He wakes Ackley up for some employer. Ackley is indignant to be woken up. He leaves Ackley's room and walks down the hall, feeling depressed. All of a sudden, he realizes he's going to leave Pincy immediately and visit Nye. He says his nerves are shot. He goes again into his room and starts a V, volves again into his room and starts a FOV packing. Seeing the ice skates his mom has simply sent him makes him sad. He thinks about her asking the income man or woman a number of questions on the purchase. Now, only some days after receiving the gift, he is being thrown out of every other faculty. He says that on every occasion he receives a gift, he feels a bit unhappy. He finishes packing and counts his cash. He can't recall how an awful lot he had, but is aware of it turned into a variety of cash because his grandmother had simply sent him money. He wakes up a fellow pupil and sells him his typewriter for $20. As he leaves the dorms, he screams, "Sleep tight, ya morons." Bankruptcy. 8. He walks to the teach station and cleans his bloody face with snow. A female starts speaking to him and says that her son, Ernest Morrow, goes to Pincy. While she asks Holden's call, he lies and offers her the name of the school janitor. Holden knows the boy and does no longer like him. However, he says first, class things about him to Mrs. Morrow. The boy's mother says she has been concerned approximately Ernest due to the fact she fears he's too sensitive. Holden lies and says that everybody thinks Ernest is a notable guy. He fabricates a tale about how the opposite students desired Ernest to run for class president. However, he refused due to the fact he is so modest. The female is surprised by using the story, but appears to trust Holden. When she asks why Holden is going home, he tells her he has to have an operation for a mind tumor. She is very involved. Later, as she is getting off the train, she invites Holden to go to Ernest at some point of the approaching summer. He lies once more, telling her that he is going to South, the U.S. with his grandmother. Bankruptcy. 9. Holden arrives at Penn Station in New York. He wants to talk to someone. However, whilst he gets in the phone sales space, he doesn't recognize who to name. His brother D.B. is in Hollywood, and he can't name his more youthful sister, Phoebe, due to the fact his mother and father will solution the phone. He walks out and catches a cab. Holden tries to strike up a communique with the cab driver, even supplying to shop for him a drink, but the driving force is not fascinated. Holden tests right into a cheap resort. While searching out the window, he sees a person in every other room take off his clothes and placed on women's underwear and a black dress. In every other window, he sees a pair giggling at the same time as they spit liquids at each other's faces. Holden thinks that spitting a drink into someone's face is silly, however, is probably a chunk a laugh. He starts off evolved thinking about sex and says that he's a big sex maniac, despite the fact that he does not understand intercourse. He considers calling Jane Gallagher at her boarding college. So one can get via He plans to name the college and say he's her uncle and that her aunt has just died. But he adjustments his mind due to the fact he isn't within the temper. As an alternative, he calls a lady named Faith Cavendish. He had gotten her quantity from a man who went to Princeton. He told Holden that religion wasn't a prostitute, but she turned into agreeable to having sex. He calls her and makes his voice as deep and captivating as feasible. Before everything, she is indignant to her woken up. She softens whilst he mentions the man from Princeton. Holden attempts to get her to fulfill him for a drink, but she refuses. While she gives to peer him the subsequent night, he tells her that he is simplest to be had right now. They grasp up, and Holden's left thinking that he tousled the verbal exchange. Bankruptcy 10. Holden makes a decision that he isn't equipped to go to Mattress. He thinks about his sister Phoebe. He says she is the best one in the family. In line with Holden, his brother D.B. is likewise smart, and so became his late brother Ally. Holden says that he is the dumb one inside the circle of relatives. Holden also describes Phoebe as very pretty and roller skate thin. She writes memories approximately a fictional girl named Hazel Weatherfield. Holden is going all the way down to Lodge's bar. He thinks the band is horrible, and everybody is tons older than him. He attempts to reserve a drink, however, the waiter demands to see identity. Holden turns his attention to 3 women sitting at a close by desk. He thinks of them are unattractive, but they're with an adorable blonde. The women snicker whilst he begins to give them the attention. Finally, Holden is going over and asks them to bop. He is pleased to discover that the blonde woman is a remarkable dancer. Holden really admires her ability, even though she does not respond to his communique, and he thinks she is a moron. The ladies are vacationers from Seattle, Washington, and are very excited that they noticed the actor Peter Lorre earlier that day. He dances with the alternative girls and tells certainly one of them that he simply noticed Gary Cooper depart the bar. She tells her pals and they're very dissatisfied that they overlooked him. Holden buys all of the ladies' drinks and attempts to persuade them to live. However, they are saying they need to go to bed due to the fact they may be getting up early the following morning to peer the display at Radio Metropolis track corridor. Holden thinks they're depressing. Bankruptcy 11. It's Miles, still the identical nighttime. Holden can't prevent thinking about Jane Gallagher. He recollects the summer they met. His mother had called Jane's mother because she turned into indignant that the Gallagher's dog became going to the toilet at the Caulfield's lawn. Holden said good day to Jane at some point when she became by the pool, but it took some time to convince her that he did not care wherein her canine relieved himself. Holden admits that Jane is not that pretty, but he clearly preferred her smile and the way she held his hand. Jane turned into the simplest man or woman in his family that he allows see Ally's baseball mitt. She never knew Ally, but she became interested in hearing approximately him. In the future, at the same time as they had been gambling checkers on the porch, her stepfather came out of doors and asks where the cigarettes and which. Jane did not answer him, and he requested again. When he went internal, one tear fell out of Jane's eye onto the checkerboard. The tear moved Holden, and he sat down beside Jane and started to kiss her on the head. He attempted to kiss her mouth, however, she would not permit him. Holden asked Jane if her stepfather had sexually abused her, but she denied it. At the stop of Bankruptcy 11, Holden makes a decision to visit a nightclub in Greenwich Village that he heard about from his brother D. Bankruptcy 12. Holden takes a cab to Ernie's nightclub. In the course of the experience, he attempts several instances to try to strike up a conversation with the cab driver, Horwitz. He asks Horwitz approximately what occurs to the geese in Vital Park throughout the iciness. Horwitz is angry by means of Holden's questioning. However, Holden presses him for extra facts. He also asks the cab driver if he would really like to join in him for a drink. However, Horwitz isn't always involved. Whilst he arrives at Ernie's, the club is full of students on their Christmas break. The buyers are looking with reverence as Ernie performs the piano. Holden thinks that if he have been a skilled pianist, he might play within the closet because he would not need human beings to clap for him. Holden receives a table and immediately comes to a decision that he is surrounded by means of jerks. He eavesdrops on the conversations round him. At one table, a guy is telling his unattractive date approximately a soccer sport. At every other desk, a young guy is attempting to grope his date underneath the table, even as telling her about a scholar in his dorm who tried to devote suicide. Holden instructs the waiter to invite Ernie if he would like to join him for a drink. However, he doubts Ernie will get the message. All at once, one in every of D/Ef's girlfriends notices Holden. She invitations him to enroll in her and her boyfriend for a drink, but Holden says he's leaving due to the fact he doesn't want to sit down together with her. Holden places his coat on, indignant that he has to depart now earlier than hearing Ernie play once more. Chapter 13. Holden walks 41 blocks again to his resort due to the fact he doesn't experience like moving into another cab. His fingers are cold and he's indignant that a person has stolen his gloves. He thinks that he is yellow and could no longer directly confront the thief even though he knew who stole them. Thinking about his missing gloves and his cowardly conduct makes him depressed. When he arrives, returned at the lodge, Maurice, the elevator man, asks if he would like a prostitute. He tells Holden it is going to be $5 for a short stumble upon and 15 greenbacks for a lady who will stay till noon. Holden says he would like the 5 greenback deal. He is going into his room and nervously prepares for the prostitute by way of brushing his enamel and converting his blouse. The prostitute arrives, and Holden is amazed to look that she is most effective approximately his age. She takes to the air her get dressed. However, Holden he is too depressed via the state of affairs to have sex. He lies and tells her he is getting better from an operation, but says he pays her for her time. He gives her 5 greenbacks. She needs $10. However, he refuses. She calls him a bum and leaves. Chapter 14. It's far just after the prostitute has left. Holden is on my own in his resort room, thinking about Ally. He recollects a time he didn't allow Ally go with him and a chum to shoot a bob gun. Now in his room, he talks out loud to Ally, telling him he can go. He talks out loud to the useless boy each time he feels mainly depressed. Holden gets into mattress and thinks about religion and Jesus. He considers himself an atheist. He hears a knock on his door and opens it, still sporting his pajamas. Maurice and the prostitute, Sonny, come into his room and call for $5. Holden refuses to give it to them, even if Maurice threatens him. Sonny takes Holden's wallet and pulls out 5 greenbacks. He starts to cry and calls them thieves. Maurice punches him in the belly and that they go away. Holden struggles to the bathroom, feeling ill. He starts off evolved to assume that he has been shot. He fantasizes that he stumbles down the inn stairs and shoots Maurice. Jane then comes and nurses his wounds. Snapping again to fact, Holden thinks that he would like to commit suicide via jumping out of the window. However, he would not want human beings looking at his useless body on the street. Bankruptcy 15. Holden receives up and at approximately 10 o'clock within the morning and calls Sally Hayes. He invitations her to a matinee, and he or she concurs to satisfy him at o'clock that afternoon. He is going to Grand Central Station to put his baggage in a locker. He thinks approximately his mother and father and the have an effect on Ally's loss of life has had on his mom. Holden says that she has turned out to be apprehensive. He orders himself a massive breakfast. Whilst eating, he sees nuns with cheap suitcases. Holden thinks, I will even get to hate any person simply searching at them if they have cheap suitcases with them. He strikes up a communication with the nuns and gives them a 10 greenback donation. Bankruptcy, 16. After breakfast, Holden still has hours earlier than meeting Sally, so he comes to a decision to walk to Broadway with a view to discover a file that he wants to shop for Verba. It is referred to as Little Shirley Beans, and he knows Phoebe will adore it. As he walks down the road, he sees a bit boy who's singing while he walks together with his mother and father. Holden is inspired with the aid of the little boy's voice as he sings. If a frame trap a body coming via the rye, hearing the track makes Holden sense a little happier and less depressed. He unearths the record he is looking for and buys it. He then buys tickets for a play starring the Lunts. He doesn't like suggests, however he is aware of Sally can be impressed. She likes matters that appear dry and sophisticated. Holden says he can in no way definitely watch an actor and come to be misplaced within the tale because I keep demanding about whether or not he is going to do something phony each minute. He nonetheless has time before the display, so he takes a cab to a significant park. He goes to the mall to see if Phoebe is gambling there, but he doesn't see her. However, Holden does see any other little girl gambling, and he asks her if she knows Phoebe. She replies that she does, but she would not recognize in which Phoebe is. Holden allows her tighten her skate key, and she, in a well-mannered way, thank you him. He thinks that most little kids are very great, and he loves it when they're well-mannered. Holden comes to a decision to walk to the Museum of Herbal History inside the park. As he walks, he fondly recalls going there as a child and thinks approximately how the famous never change. He likes that Phoebe is having the same reports he had as a baby. When he eventually gets to the museum, he all at once adjustments his mind and does no longer want to head in. Bankruptcy, 17. Holden waits for Sally on the Biltmore Lodge and appears at all the girls in the lobby. Even though he enjoys looking at the younger women, he will become depressed considering the guys they may marry, and the lives they may marry, and the lives they may sooner or later lead. Sally appears, and Holden takes one, have a look at her, and comes to a decision he desires to marry her, despite the fact that he does not actually like her. For the duration of the play's intermission, she sees a younger guy that she is aware of. He comes over, and that they talk mutual pals. Holden is disgusted with the aid of their phony verbal exchange. After the play, Sally desires to move ice, skating at Radio Metropolis. Holden agrees to take her. They try to skate. However, neither considered one of them is any exact at it, so he suggests they take a seat down and feature a drink. Even as they may be having their cokes, Holden starts a volve to tell Sally that he hates school. He says it's full of phonies, and all you do is have a look at so that you can examine sufficient to be smart enough to have the ability to buy a goddamn Cadillac someday. Sally is flustered by way of the communique. Holden comes up with a plan. He wants to take Sally to New England and stay in a cabin. He says that when his cash runs out, he'll get a process and they are able to get married. Sally says his plan won't work. She says that if they ever get married, they could do it after college. Holden calls her a royal pain within the ass. Sally is taken aback by way of his coarse language and starts to cry. Holden apologizes, but Sally is angry and refuses to let him take her domestic. Holden leaves. He realizes that he definitely could now not have desired to take Sally to New England, however additionally admits that he supposed it while he asked her to head. Chapter 18. Holden tries to name Jane once more, but gets no solution. He most effective has a few numbers in his deal with ebook, so he calls an vintage pal named Carl Luce, who now goes to Columbia. Carl has the same opinion to fulfill him at 10 o'clock. That offers Holden a whole lot of time to kill, so he is going to look a movie. He thinks approximately DB, as reports at some stage in international conflict The bankruptcy ends with Holden thinking that if there may be every other struggle, he'll volunteer to sit down on top of an atomic bomb. Chapter 19. Holden meets Carl at the Wicker Bar. Holden is satisfied to see Carl. However, the feeling is not mutual. Carl is offended by means of Holden's questions about his intercourse lifestyles. He calls Holden immature, and Holden has the same opinion with him. Holden is involved to examine that Carl is courting a Chinese language woman in her overdue 30s. He maintains to ask Carl private questions on their dating, till Carl refuses to talk to him anymore. Carl tells Holden that he desires to visit a psychoanalyst. He gets up to go away, and Holden begs him to live, saying that he's lonely, but Carl insists on leaving. Chapter 20. After Carl leaves, Holden stays at the bar and gets inebriated. He pretends he has been shot. After a while, he calls Sally. Her grandmother answers the phone and refuses to put her on the cell phone. Holden slurs his phrases, time and again inquiring for Sally. Sally selections up the smartphone, and he tells her that he goes to help her trim her Christmas tree. She knows he's inebriated, tells him to name her the next day. Holden is going into the restroom and pours water over his head. He sits there for a long time and talks to the bar's piano player. The person tells him that he's inebriated and have to cross home. Holden comes to a decision to go to Principal Park. As he walks, he drops the report that he sold for Phoebe and turns into very sad. When he reaches the park, that's empty and darkish. Holden thinks approximately demise and his own funeral. He makes a decision to head domestic to his apartment so he can see Phoebe before he dies. He desires to sneak in and speak to her without waking up his mother and father. Bankruptcy 21. Holden returns home and finds Phoebe slumbering in DB's room. She likes to sleep there whilst he's in Hollywood due to the fact it's far the most important room within the house. Earlier than waking her up, Holden reads via her faculty pocketbook and is amused by way of her notes. Ultimately, he wakes her up. She is thrilled to peer him, and without delay starts Evolve to peer him and without her school play and a movie she saw earlier in the day. She additionally tells Holden that their mother and father went to a party in Connecticut and will not be home until very late. She asks Holden why he's home from college so early. Before everything, he denies he became kicked out of college. However, Phoebe is wise and guesses the reality. She will become very disappointed with him. Holden tells her that he goes to get a task on a ranch in Colorado, but Phoebe pulls a pillow over her head and will no longer communicate to him. Holden goes into the residing room to get a few cigarettes. Bankruptcy 22. Holden is going lower back into the bedroom, but Phoebe will no longer speak to him. He tries to joke round with her. However, she most effective tells him, "Daddy'll kill you." Holden repeats that he goes to Colorado to get a process on a ranch, but Phoebe reminds him that he can't experience a horse. Holden pinches her playfully. However, she keeps asking Holden approximately school and why he flunked. Holden tells her that the guys at Pincy have been phonies who not noted the scholars with zits. He mentions how they excluded Ackley. Phoebe listens to Holden, but does not make any remarks. He continues telling her about the phonies at Pincy, pronouncing that even the lecturers have been insincere. Finally, Phoebe accuses him of not liking whatever. Holden denies it, however, has trouble at once taking into account something he likes. He recalls the nuns and a student at Elkton Hills named James Fort. Different boys on the school had tormented James. To be able to get away them, he jumped out of a window and died. He turned into sporting a turtleneck sweater he had borrowed from Holden whilst it happened. Finally, Holden tells Phoebe that he likes Ally and talking to her. He says that he does not need to be a health practitioner or a lawyer when he grows up. Rather, he wants to be a catcher within the rye. His process would encompass watching kids playing in a subject of rye and catching them earlier than they fell off of a cliff. Phoebe listens, but most effective responds by saying again that their father goes to kill Holden. Holden decides to name Mr. Antolini, considered one of his teachers at Elkton Hills. Bankruptcy, 23. Holden calls Mr. Antolini and tells him that he has flunked out of Pincy. Mr. Antolini could be very satisfactory and tells Holden to return right over. Mr. Antolini had picked James up after he jumped out of the window and taken him to the infirmary. After their communication, Holden and Phoebe dance till they listen. Their dad and mom come domestic. Holden hides within the closet. When his mom has left the room, Holden asks Phoebe for some money. She gives him the money she is meant to apply to Shop for Christmas Provides. As he's taking the cash, he begins to cry. The crying scares Phoebe, but he cannot forestall. He tells Phoebe good bye and offers her his searching hat. Chapter 24. Holden arrives at Mr. Antolini's residence. Mr. Antolini is consuming a highball. They discuss Holden's issues at Pincy. Mr. Antolini says that he has talked to Holden's father and Mr. Caulfield may be very involved about his son. He says he is also worried approximately Holden and is afraid something horrible goes to manifest to him. The trainer tells Holden that he can also grow to be in his 1930s. Honestly, hating each person who seems like they performed college, soccer, or speaks with bad grammar. He's taken a bit of paper and writes something on it for Holden to study and preserve. It's far a quote with the aid of the psychoanalyst Wilhelm Stiekel. The mark of the immature man is that he desires to die nobly for a cause, even as the mark of the mature man is that he wants to stay humbly for one. Holden appreciates the deep challenge Mr. Antolini has for him. However, he's too tired to concentrate on what the instructor is attempting to inform him. They put sheets and blankets on the sofa and Holden at once falls asleep. A quick time later, he wakes as much as locate Mr. Antolini petting his head. Holden is horrified and quick places on his garments and leaves. He tells Mr. Antolini that he has to get his bags in Grand Significant Station and he will be proper lower back. But he does not intend to return to the residence. Bankruptcy, 25. Holden takes the subway to Grand Principal Station and sleeps for numerous hours. Whilst he wakes up, he thinks about Mr. Antolini and wonders if he have to have gone back to his residence. He starts to think that the teacher could have been innocently touching him. He additionally thinks approximately the great things Mr. Antolini has finished. There may be a magazine on the bench beside him. He reads more than one articles that convince him there's something wrong together with his hormones and he would possibly have cancer. He tries to devour donuts for breakfast, but feels unable to swallow. He goes outside and begins taking walks down Fifth Street. As he walks, he thinks that he goes to collapse and nobody will ever see him again. He starts to talk to his brother, Ali, begging him no longer to allow him disappear. He decides he'll in no way pass domestic again and will instead run away and get a job at a gasoline station. Holden creates a plan that involves him pretending to be a deaf mute, so he by no means has to have a verbal exchange once more. He will meet a deaf lady and marry her. If they have children, they may conceal them from the sector and train them a way to read and write. The plan makes him excited. He runs to Phoebe's faculty to tell her goodbye. Once he arrives, he writes her a notice, telling her that he goes out west and that she must meet him at the museum at sector beyond noon. Whilst watching for Phoebe on the museum, he talks to two younger brothers, approximately mummies. Holden gets diarrhea, after which faints as he is coming out of the bathroom. Phoebe is past due. However, she indicates up sporting his crimson-looking hat and sporting a large suitcase. She tells Holden that she has introduced her clothes because she goes with him. Holden, feeling like he might faint again, tells her that she cannot pass. She begs him. However, he refuses. She begins to cry, then takes to the air his hat and throws it at him. Holden tries to talk to her. However, she won't talk to him. He begins walking toward the zoo, understanding that she will comply with him. They reach the carousel and Holden buys her a price ticket. He watches her pass around on it. Afterwards, she tells him that she is not indignant. She takes his searching hat out of his pocket and puts it on his head. It starts to rain, and Holden gets soaking wet whilst he enjoys looking her trip the carousel again in her blue coat. He feels so happy, he almost cries. Chapter 26. Holden says he's going to cease his tale without telling what he did whilst he got home and how he became sick. He does now not say the call of the region wherein he's staying. He does say that a variety of humans, which include a psychoanalyst, hold asking him if he will observe himself whilst he goes again to high school in September. DB got here to go to him and requested him questions about what Bup fell. Holden says he does not recognize what to consider all of it. He is simplest sorry he advised his tale to such a lot of human beings. Now he misses everybody he pointed out, even Maurice. He says not to ever tell absolutely everyone whatever. If you do, you start lacking absolutely